I suppose if you read the title, found isn't exactly the right word. It's a bit complicated. You'll see what I mean. I'm a cop, based in eastern Nevada. Been one for about 12 years now. Experienced a lot of things during that period that I could have gone lifetimes without, but everything that I've seen up until this point, sick and twisted as it might have been, at least these things made some kind of sense, or yielded some kind of logical conclusion, but this, I just don't fucking know. The call came through late at night. A panicked-sounding man was breathing heavily into the phone, saying something along the lines of, "We need help. They let it out. It's out." It was hard to say for sure. He was barely coherent. After a few minutes, the line went dead. We traced the call to a small shack in the middle of a forest on the other side of town. When we got there, we found a cell phone that looked like it had been smashed, lying in the grass a few feet away from the entrance. And no one. We got into the shack and searched around, but found nothing but a small stool. We scoped the place inside out, but there just seemed to be nothing. And eventually, one of my partners, a 240-pound beefcake named Jeff, plops down onto the stool in frustration. And as soon as he did this, the entire floor under the stool gave way. He didn't fall too far, thankfully, only about 4 meters, but he had uncovered something truly bizarre. It was a man-made tunnel. So, following the standard protocol, taking extreme precautions, we jumped down. Here was the disconcerting part. The tunnel went both ways. In other words, the shack wasn't the starting point. We decided to send 4 guys one way, 3 the other. I was part of the 3 that went backwards from where we'd initially broken through. From the illumination of the flashlights, the tunnel seemed to be pretty barren. Rough, muddy walls and ceilings, wooden supports every about a half meter. It got me thinking, who the hell would go through all the trouble and process of making this in the middle of nowhere? Eventually, we came across what appeared to be a ladder descending further downwards. And oh, the hesitation in the air. This was not what we had expected, and we all stood there for a second, not wanting to admit to each other that none of us really wanted to go down there, but then we heard the scream. Ear-piercing. It wasn't faint, it wasn't distant. It sounded like it was coming from only a few meters below us. So, fueled by that sudden adrenaline rush, I decided to go down first. The climb was short, only about 15 seconds worth. I found myself in what I can only describe as a small computer lab. Dirty concrete floors and walls, but there were 4 monitors, all displaying an error screen, all hooked up to what I thought was some kind of power source. Can't say for sure, I was never a computer guy. Actually, not all of them had the error screen. 1 out of the 4 had its screen smashed to bits. Then we heard another scream, and we turned our attention to a half-open door in the far corner of the room. For a brief moment, I saw a shadowy figure move past. The screaming stopped as abruptly as it had started, replaced by the sounds of something dragging on the floor. We barged into the room, guns drawn, but turns out the room was about the size of a closet, and there was nothing there. Well, no, not nothing. There was another tunnel. or the entrance to one, smaller and a lot more crude than the one that we had first entered. It led straight, vertically, down. We shone our flashlights through it, but down there was only black. Safe to say, we didn't pursue what had presumably just gone down there. We were all scared petrified. I could hear hearts beating, rapid, scattered breaths as we sprinted back out and up into the shack again. When we did, we were alone. We waited, stunned, horrified, for the other officers to come back out. But they never did. Now, I know cops were supposed to be brave, but at that moment, we couldn't move. Eventually, we just called it in. Backup arrived. We told them what had happened. They just looked confused, but I could tell they were horrified just listening to the account, so I decided after that to take a break from work. They allowed it. In fact, never even followed up or told me what all had eventually happened. At the time, I thought that was a good thing, but since then I haven't been able to sleep. It's not even that I've been having nightmares, I was just too terrified to let my brain rest. Even with my wife laying beside me, I still felt this vague, if perpetual, sense of danger. I needed some kind of closure, so I decided to go in to the station and ask around myself. I knocked on the captain's door and he let me in. First thing I saw when I entered was his expression. I've never seen him look that scared before. You want to know what happened, don't you? So I nodded. He lets out this dry, humorless laugh. I don't know, was his response. He stopped speaking after that, and instead, he simply stared at me in silence for about a minute before I decided to leave. I was too shaken by all of it to discuss the issue with anybody else. That encounter didn't help my case. Went back home, sat on my couch going through marathons upon marathons of every funny movie I could find on Netflix. Yeah, it kinda helped, but only a little. And then I got a text from Jeff. Come see this, right now. I assumed it had to do with what had happened in the shack. Thought about it for a few hours before finally making my way to his apartment. I needed some kind of closure. I needed to take any chance to find it. He invited me in. I noticed that he had that same look of indistinct dread that the captain had had, but he was a little more willing to talk at least. After a quick, somewhat reserved hello, he gestured to a laptop sitting on a table behind him. What's that? I asked him. He lets out this long exhale before answering. Recovered from the room in the tunnel. I thought back to the time we were down in the closet, and I remembered seeing a laptop on one of the tables. I guess it looked like that. Well, how do you have it? Was my follow-up question. This time his response was simple. I took it. Why? He looks away for a second, his demeanor turning contemplative. Something's gotta make sense here. Something they're not telling us. And silently, I agreed. So I asked him what he'd seen on it. 5 video files, he says, all between 5 and 10 minutes long. Have you watched them yet? Just the one. Things making more sense? And he shook his head before sighing. No. But I think you should see it anyway. He leaves the room, grabs me a cup of coffee, and then sits back down at the table. I opened up the video folder and I see the names of the 5 clips. Train to Oblivion, Investigation, Fireworks, Triangle, and The Obscure Man. Watch Train to Oblivion, says Jeff. I take a few moments to think about it before obliging. Better than nothing, thought to myself. And I pressed play. This is what I saw. It starts out with what I assume is footage from a handheld camera. As expected, we were on a train. However, there was immediately a feeling of something wrong. The person behind the camera, it sounded like a woman, was near hyperventilating. She was running down a narrow aisle, lights flickering above her. In addition to that, it looked as if they were in a tunnel with the windows showing only darkness. As she ran, she kept opening the cabin doors and peering inside, and every one of them had people in it. Lifeless people with limp faces contorted into inhuman expressions. Mouths stretched out way too far, eyes sunken inwards, and noses turned completely sideways. At some point, she tries opening a door, but it seems to be locked. We hear hushed whispering coming from behind it as she starts banging on it, begging to be let in. This is interrupted by heavy footsteps coming from somewhere to one side. She quickly turns her head, facing what looked like 3 extremely tall figures about a car and a half away. She shrieks and starts running again. The video goes on like this for a while, her just sprinting around the tight space and screaming, while we see intermittent glimpses of the figures just following her. However, it wasn't until the end that we got a good look at them. She finds a bathroom and runs into it, locking it from inside. And she sits there whimpering for a while before the door starts rattling. Her screams become deafening as it finally breaks down. I nearly screamed myself when I saw what did it. Tall, pale things wearing what looked like dirty suits. But it was their faces that got me. I don't even think that I can call them faces, in all honesty. They were just swirls of skin, if that even makes sense. It was like a pale vortex of flesh. One of them reaches out this bony hand and grabs the woman's wrist. A brief struggle ensues that ends with her facing the mirror. The woman's face was now twisted into the same horrendous expression that we'd seen on countless other passengers just before. We hear a loud horn blare before the video finally ends. But here's the weird part. Not that all of it hasn't been weird so far. This just added another level of horror on what we'd already seen. In the mirror's reflection, there was no indication whatsoever that the woman was holding anything to film with. No camera, no phone, nothing. In fact, her hands were down at her sides, and the creatures sure as hell weren't filming. I remained in silence for what felt like an hour after watching this. Jeff didn't say anything, he just stared at me. I didn't know what to make of it. Eventually, I just decided to get up and leave. Jeff didn't say anything. I'm back home now, and there's no clear solution here. It's obvious that my sleeping woes aren't going to end until I figure something out. But that seems like a daunting task right now, and one that I don't think I'm prepared to handle just at the moment. I think that the best course of action may be to go back and watch the rest of the videos. I mean, there has to be some clue as to what happened in them. However, one thing is pushing me away from that decision. As I was getting ready to leave Jeff's place, I saw something out his kitchen window. There was a figure standing behind a street sign. Actually, it was barely a figure at all. It looked more like some kind of shadow. And I don't know how, but I knew it was staring straight at me. So come back next time, and we'll try to figure out what's going on. Until then, stay scary, wildlings. Make the most of your nights.